So what we see is that on the one side we have Barack Obama, who is a consistent revisionist when it comes to the law, and he also affirms judicial activism. On the other hand, we have John McCain, who is an inconsistent originalist, but he does reject judicial activism. Now, judicial activism is when judges on the bench attempt to legislate through their decisions instead of interpreting and simply applying the law. In judicial activism, judges today can create policies and add meanings to the Constitution which have no precedent and are not established by any elected body of legislature. This is what happened last May when the State Supreme Court of California overturned the decision of the voters to protect marriage as between one man and one woman. They are applying this idea that the law is and the Constitution's a living, changing document. There are also instances where judges have overturned many other cases. For example, though 82% of Americans support school prayers, these living document revisionist judges declared that to be illegal, going against the wishes of the people. Activist judges have also overturned elections in New York and Washington that banned physician-assisted suicides. In Arkansas and Washington State, elections that enacted term limits and a Missouri election that rejected a tax increase were also overturned by revisionist judges. So in order to be a consistent Christian, we have to choose leaders that hold to a strict interpretation of the Constitution until the voters vote to change through the proper procedures of amending the Constitution, until voters vote to change the Constitution. Judges should not be involved in changing it just because it doesn't fit their political or social agenda. So this is a major issue today, and I think that this is one of the most significant points in relation to the presidential election. Two recent Supreme Court nominees and appointments were men who held to a literal interpretation of the Constitution, John Roberts and Samuel Alito. Obama voted against both of these men, whereas John McCain voted for both of these men. Now, presupposition here is that the Bible teaches that history is important. The Bible, when it interprets itself, always interprets itself on the basis of a literal, historical, grammatical interpretation. This is how we interpret everything in life. We do not assign it whatever meaning we wish to. So when we look at this in summary in terms of this first point, I started off by saying that we must understand the kind of government that we have. And to understand that, we must get into the history of the founders to understand our Constitution and the political philosophy that they built into this. From that point, I moved on to looking at the foundational issue of our assumptions and presuppositions in relationship to history and interpretation. And those who minimize history and precedents also do that consistently in the area of interpretation of the Bible and the interpretation of law, and this works itself out in the belief system of the candidates. In fact, a lot of the issues that I hear pundits talk about that they identify as character issues really aren't character issues at all. They are more properly termed belief issues. They associate with certain people because they believe the same things. Senator Obama doesn't hang around with former terrorists. That's not a character problem. It is a belief system problem because he doesn't see a difference in what he believes and what the former terrorist believes, what Bill Ayers believes. So it's improperly labeled. So that is a foundational or presuppositional issue. Now, let's go on. How should we make decisions regarding to our leaders? Well, we have to understand something, as I pointed out, about the nature of the American form of government and American history. In studying the history of the United States Constitution and the ideas in it, we can have a better idea of how we should vote in a way that will protect our freedoms and our liberties. So the question is, what was the most determinative influence on the founding fathers and on the documents that they wrote? When John Adams was asked this question in 1816, his response may surprise you. John Adams' response was, it was the pastors in the pulpits that was the most determinative influence on the founding fathers. John Adams said in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now, I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. The founding fathers again and again emphasized the fact that they got their ideas from the Bible and from the Word of God. In answering the question about the most influential element on the founders, Adams not only said the pastors in the pulpits, he went on to name some, like Jonathan Mayhew and Samuel Cooper, who were among some of the leading preachers during the First Great Awakening. Adams said, quote, these were the most conspicuous, the most ardent, and influential in the awakening and revival of American principles and feelings that led to our independence. Other ministers which we could mention would be George Whitefield, James Caldwell, John Peter, Gabriel Muhlenberg, and his brother Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, which I'll talk about later. So John Adams believed that the foundational and most significant influence on the founding of this nation were the pastors, and he was right. The pastors did not back off from preaching about the political issues of the day. In fact, one scholar who published her findings in the early 1960s read every published sermon from New England preachers from 1600 to 1776 and said that there was no idea found in the founding documents of this nation that had not been preached consistently from the pulpits of America for 150 years. A study was developed, a 10-year project was developed began in the 90s, analyzing 15,000 writings from the era of the founding of the United States. Their goal was to try to isolate the key ideas in the founding documents and the sources of quotes in the founding documents. From these 15,000 writings, the researchers isolated 3,154 quotations. 34% of them came from the Bible, which was the single most frequently cited source. There were certain individuals that were also influential and whose various writings were also cited. Among the most prominent was John Locke. Although many have been taught that John Locke was a deist or an atheist, he was not. I was surprised to learn that in his generation there were many who classified him not as a philosopher as he is today, but as a theologian. He wrote a verse-by-verse commentary on the Pauline epistles, and he compiled a topical index of the Bible, as well as defending Christianity in 3 different books. His most influential work on politics was entitled The Two Treatises of Government. Richard Henry Lee thought that the Declaration of Independence was just plagiarized from it, by the way. But in his work, The Two Treatises of Government, a 400-page book, John Locke referred to the Bible over 1,500 times. In fact, when he developed his whole principle related to the importance of private property, he started in Genesis chapter 1. This was standard in that era. You did not go to some sort of evolutionary theory. You went to the Bible. The importance of the Bible was also seen in the writings of the founders. And I want you to pay attention to this, because this is one of the most profound things that I have run across.